Morning. Today we've got a slightly different video for you. This is going to be a walk and a talk about somebody called Robert Hooke. We're here in the Isle of Wight at Yarmouth, and we're going to walk over to Freshwater and back, and on the way we're going to discover some of the places that Robert Hooke lived as a boy before he moved off the island. He was born in 1635, so nearly 400 years ago. So let's just take a quick look at the estuary. So here's the estuary today, this morning. It's October 2024. You can see it's a beautiful place for wildfowl to live and to breed. So if you're at school and you studied Hooke's Law or heard about Hooke's Law, you'll probably remember him. And Robert Hooke was actually born and raised here as a boy over at Freshwater, where we'll be going later. So Robert Hooke was born in 1635, and his father was a guy called John Hooke, and he was the reverend of a local church here, a clergyman, and the plans for his son were to bring him up in the clergy. But as it was, Robert was quite a sickly child. As much as he actually didn't really attend school very much, he was taught at home by his father John. So yeah, he was homeschooled, and that probably formed his early life. He spent a lot of time down here on the estuary looking at what the fishermen were doing, and actually building models of boats and trying to replicate in a smaller form what the shipwrights were doing. And then when he was 13, unfortunately his father died, I think of a consumptive disease. And in them days, when you were 13, you were considered to be independent, and he inherited £40 from his father's estate, and he had another £10 from his grandmother's estate as well. So with that money, he could go and do what he wanted to do as a 13-year-old. So he actually went over to London and enrolled in Westminster School, where he wanted to study and become an artist. That was his first passion, and that served him well later on, his drafting skills. But after a few months, he decided that wasn't really what he wanted to do, and then he went off and studied things like the classics and got involved in chemical engineering at a very early age. So this is where he'd have spent a lot of his time as a youth, along this estuary, looking at what the boatmen were doing, learning by looking. And then when he was at Westminster College, he went through those formative years looking at studying under an artist, and then decided that he wanted to look at scientific things. There's not much recorded about this. In fact, a lot of the things about Hooke are lost to history, because he came to blows, really, not physically, but mentally. He wasn't afraid of calling people out, and I think he fell out with Newton at one point, and Newton made it his life's work after that to kind of either deride Hooke or get rid of some of the records of Hooke. So as time went on, he went to Oxford. He had to be self-funded there, so he had to kind of carry out other duties to fund his education, which wasn't unusual in those days. And so we're talking of nearly 400 years ago. And he was noticed anyway by the chemistry teacher he had, and he was recommended to another Robert Boyle. So when he went to work under Robert Boyle as his assistant, I think he ended up spending 7 years with Boyle, and was instrumental in some of Boyle's discovery, the gas law, because Boyle was having a real big issue with developing a pump that would actually hold and seal against the elements. And it was Robert Hooke that came up with that pump, designed it, developed it, manufactured it so it was airtight, so it could hold certain atmospheres of air and pressure. So that was instrumental, and Boyle actually recognised that Hooke's air pump helped that work. So we're going to have a little walk now, and then I'll add another bit later. So by the time 1660 came around, Hooke's interest was looking at springs and clocks. He actually worked with a clock maker, and he came up with a circular spring that was used in watch movements later on, but he never patented it. He decided that he wasn't going to do that, although I think Boyle recommended that he patent it, and that went undiscovered for another 15 odd years before I think a German decided that he'd invented the watch spring. Anyway, in this work he was doing with springs, this is where we get Hooke's law come in. So in 1660, so by now he's 25 years of age, so it's still early on in his life. He notices that there's actually the linear variation in spring is proportional to the load applied to it, and that's basically Hooke's law. And we talk about elasticity, and that's what Hooke's law is all about. So we'll come back later and find out some more about Hooke later. Yeah, we're still on the estuary here of the River Yar, and we were talking about Robert Hooke and Hooke's law. And then a couple of years later, that work that he'd done, he was recognised in that in 1662 he was made the curator of experiments for the newly formed Royal Society. And he was responsible, he's made responsible there for weekly meetings and a demonstration of experiments for many years. So some of the papers he read and the experiments that he carried out there again were formative, and I'll try and share here something on screen that show he had things like evacuated air from a glass bell and sat inside it, all sorts of weird and wonderful experiments. He was also the inventor of a microscope, an illuminated microscope, and that led him to publish a well-known work back then, that described the entomology of things like fleas and other insects, and actually drew them out, and that was called a micrographia. Still acknowledged as a book that he instigated that type of work. So that was he published that in 1665. So by now he's only 30 years old, and already he's influenced quite far and wide. And I think I can resonate with Hooke because he didn't seem to stay in one place. He wanted to do different things all the time. So when he was involved with these clockmakers, one of the things that they needed to re-engineer was these clocks were very noisy, the pendulums were noisy. So Hooke came up with the idea, it's called Hooke's joint, of the universal joint. So that's two stirrups mounted 90 degrees to each other with a four joints on a spider that would allow complete freedom of that movement. So it's something now that obviously we see in all prop shafts and all drive shafts and lots of other machinery, and that all came from the design and the work that Robert Hooke did back in 1677. So yeah, we're thankful for that to Robert Hooke. I don't suppose he'd have walked down. He may have walked down through these woods hundreds of years ago. Then latterly, probably in the 1800s, this was a railway line, which obviously has now been dismantled. And to the right of us, we've still got the estuary of the Yar, and that one, at one point in time, actually cut off the peninsula of what is now the peninsula of the west of the Isle of Wight into the island of West Wight. So when Robert Hooke lived here, West Wight was its own separate island. This is the church, All Saints, where John Hooke, Robert's father, has been curate, but it would not have been this size. This is kind of from the 19th century, really. It'd have been a lot smaller than this. Yeah, all this area, this is just up from the estuary, the crossing down there at the Yar would have been where Robert Hooke spent his formative years. He was training to be a scientist, really, by not going to school, which I can advocate for. I think some of modern schooling probably does more harm than good. Yeah, it's interesting too. It's obviously a very wealthy part of the Isle of Wight when this was rebuilt into its present form. Not much grave keeping going on. You can see how close we are to the estuary through those trees. Just literally walked across the causeway and up the hill. They've just come down from the church, All Saints, and this is Hooke Hill. And there's a monument here to Hooke, which is easily missed. We actually walk past it. So, as you see, it says here to born nearby in 1635. We're now at part of the Hooke Trail where we go across, called Afton Marsh, and this is probably where he got his interest in entomology, because we can see here there's lots of insects around Afton Marsh, and we're in actually just after a period where this is flooded, so it's quite interesting in that. Yeah, if we had money, more water, we wouldn't be able to get across this path. So we can go across here. I mean, the reason it's a marsh is going back a few centuries. The River Yar would have been an estuary that cut off the west side of West Wight. You can actually see some interesting wildlife around here. It's just off the main road. I mean, you can park. There's a big Tesco, well, not big, but there's a Tesco supermarket next door to this. So you could come and just park in Tesco for an hour, I suppose, and come for a walk. So I wonder if this place led Robert Hooke to decide to draw the insects around here, and then led to him inventing his microscope. I wouldn't be surprised that he had these early thoughts as a young boy of 12 or 13, walking around this part of the Isle of Wight. So we're near the end of our Hooke Trail walk now in the Isle of Wight. We've been over to Freshwater Bay. We're now back over the Yarmouth side of the island. And there's a place here as well that kind of fits in with something else that Hooke was doing. He wasn't content with just looking at microscopes in the microscopic world. He actually turns his lens as well, or lenses, towards the skies, and he made some important discoveries that kind of lasted the test of time and even were referred to hundreds of years later. So he's probably one of the first kind of astronomers of his age, and he He's one of the first, or if not the first, to record the moons of Jupiter and the spot on Jupiter, and also sunspots and the rotation of the planets as an ellipse. And he also made maps of the surface of the moon at the time, which actually later, when they checked those maps, they were quite accurate. And you think this guy was doing this in the 1600s. The Hooke is probably also the father of metrology, because he presented papers at the Royal Institute that talked about the historical patterns of weather, and he also came up with a barometer, a thermometer, an anemometer, and also talked about moisture and a hydrometer. This was recognised actually by the Oxford University in the 1980s when they established the Hooke Institute for atmospheric research in the 1980s. During his time with Boyle, I think he's already mentioned this, his main problem Boyle was making a pump that would seal and also compress atmospheric pressure, and Hooke came up with a solution, and Boyle even recognised that and said that without Hooke's work that would not have happened. Of course, that resulted in Boyle's law, which says, quote, at constant temperature the volume of a gas is inversely proportional to the pressure exerted upon it. Hooke was also a surveyor and an architect, and after the fire, the Great Fire in London of 1666, he was made an assistant as a chief architect to plan the rebuilding of London. So he had a part in the design and the building of the monument, and also of quite a few churches, only 3 of which still exist in London. So that's my kind of tribute to Robert Hooke. He's one of those people that, if you could choose those people to go to dinner with, I think I'd have him sitting at the table, because I can quite empathise with his way of thinking, of not just working on one thing at a time. So that's the reason for this video. I'm an engineer. I enjoy this stuff. I'm involved with this stuff every day. So it's good to refer back to these people that existed, I think, 400 years ago. So thanks for watching the video. Hopefully you can give it a thumbs up, give it a like, maybe share it with somebody. If not, then suggest something a subject I can work on, and yeah, I'll be happy to do so. So let's just leave you with a view of the Solent on a really nice day in October. We've been spoilt with the weather today. Hardly any wind, as you can see by that boat. So thanks very much, and I'll see you again.